that was affected by the Fort Hood tragedy yesterday? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a time for public comment. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may do so prior to this meeting. Public comments will be addressed during this portion of the meeting. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. No discussion or final action will be taken by the City Council. Ms. Frances Fisher.
Hi, my name is Frances Fisher, 2504 Skyline Drive, and I just had a question for the mayor and all the councilmen. Have any of y'all requested an outside investigation in all this stuff with Judy Morales? Anyone? No?
We can't comment during the public comment period.
Okay. Could I possibly at some time in the near future get a letter from any or one of y'all letting me know whether y'all have requested an outside investigation either by the Texas Rangers, the IRS, or the FBI?
Yes, ma'am. That'd be
Thank
just
you.
fine. Mr. C.J. Grisham.
Mr. Mayor, fellow citizens of Temple, last night tragedy struck Fort Hood once again. We must remember the soldiers who were killed and their families and ask God to be with them in their time of need. We must also ask God to be with the wounded and their families so that they may heal as well. We should pray for peace, but we must also take into the fact that things like this can be deterred or prevented in the future. My fellow citizens, this is a call to action. Action to give everyone the inherent right to self-defense. We must not live in fear. The way to do this is enact change today. I urge you all to call your congressman and call upon your local city reps to put a stop to the needless harassment of armed law-abiding citizens. We must call on last year I asked the council to consider a resolution recognizing our right to keep and bear arms. And since that day, the city has only added restrictions to the exercise of this right by putting up a sign. The incident last night at Fort Hood should be proof that a sign or policy barring law-abiding citizens the God-given right to self-defense does nothing but victimize the public. We must call our congressman to make us all safer by repealing the laws that make the inherent right to self-defense take that away from our troops. If we can carry it at war, we can carry it home. We must demand changes to Texas law to allow open carry as a deterrent to criminal activity. Gun control doesn't work. More than a dozen Fort Hood attacks since 1993, when the policy was enacted that disarmed soldiers, has proven that. Saying people or troops shouldn't have firearms because of suicides, accidental discharges, soldier-on-soldier, or people-on-people violence are just ignorant excuses that make innocent people defenseless in the face of evil. I spent over 4 hours last night hoping to God that the shooter was nowhere near me or my soldiers. As I listened to the big voice on the loudspeaker that told me to hunker down and to lock the doors and turn off my ventilation units, I had to wonder, was that shooter in my building? Did I just now lock myself in a building with an armed killer? There was nothing I could do if he was, because I was disarmed. Make no mistake, we're at war, whether it be with terrorists, the criminal element, or a corrupt government. And every man should have the right to defend himself, his family, his property, and yes, even his own troops. Remember, we are in the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And I would ask that you contact your congressman, contact the base general, and demand and ask that they lift these restrictions that bar soldiers that are licensed to carry concealed handguns from being able to defend themselves against these senseless acts of violence. It took the MPs, granted they responded very quickly. They responded within 5 minutes of the call that they got. However, the call that they got wasn't until 10 minutes after the incident, which means that there was no response for 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, one single person killed 3 individuals and wounded 16 others because not a single person could shoot back. And I would ask that the public help us to prevent that from happening in the future. Thank you.
Ms. Emily Grisham.
Emily Emily Grisham. I live at 4365 Airport Trail. I'd like to talk about the air show a little bit. I'd like to request a direct inquiry about where it gives the airport the right to dictate to private citizens to kick them and keep them off their privately owned property during the air show. Because all of a sudden for 3 days, a little plot of land which they should have no control over is deemed unsafe without compensation. The road that the people that live right there by the airport that were forced to use as a detour is Mauser Road, which is unkempt by the city in spite of many requests previously to come out and properly fix the road. You can even tell by Google Earth Maps how bad the road is, with holes and ridges and chunks of loose road to drive through. The people that live there, we have airplanes and helicopters flying over our heads and our homes all the time, every day. It's no less safe for 3 days during the air show. I imagine our police officers that are posted there to turn people away, even the people that work there that have to go all the way around when the cattle that they need to get to are just right there, can be used for something more useful, especially when they stand there just to holler at people. It seems to me as if the airport is more upset that we just invite friends to watch the air show in our front yards than anything. Also, last year the city left one of their roadblocks there on the private property. The state of Texas charges a minimum of $500 for littering. It's been 333 days today. I'd say the city of Temple owes Grisham Farms $166,500 for keeping their trash there. Please keep your officers in the city airport from kicking us off of our property this year. If there isn't a law that demands it, because if not, what the city is doing is illegal and harassment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Now we will receive a report from the Planning and Zoning Commission for the fiscal year 2012-2013 to include plats, zoning, conditional use permits, plan development, code amendment, and I-35 corridor appeal cases. Will Sears, how are you?
Hi. Will Sears, current Planning and Zoning Commission Chairman. So I just want to give you guys a quick overview of kind of what we did over the last year. So here we have 3 UDC text amendments and comprehensive planned amendment. They kind of primarily dealt with, the first one, ZFY 1336, dealt with some dimensional standards, overlay window requirements, First and Third Street overlay district, and small street parking requirements. The second one was ZFY 1314, dealt with some social services issues, boarding room house, correctional facility, halfway house, religious institution, and substance abuse treatment facility, social service shelter, and a transitional shelter. And then the last one was ZFY 1312, dealt with 9 different sections, which were fairly small. The one amendment to the comprehensive plan was a Thoroughfare Plan. We also dealt with 5 I-35 appeals. Texas Roadhouse, Johnson Brothers Gateway, Center, Garland Shelton, Golden Corral. Most of those dealt with landscaping and parking improvements. As you guys probably recall, most of those. A few of them had to do with lighting and lighting as well. So pretty simple, pretty consistent, particularly some of the car dealerships were pretty consistent on what they wanted to do with landscaping. This next slide talks about the public hearing cases. We did 19 rezonings, 17 were approved, 1 denial, 1 withdrawn, 8 CUPs, 2 PDs, 1 PD was withdrawn, and 1 was approved. Next slide talks about the residential and commercial plots. 27 subdivision plots were processed for 2013. 12 were for residential, and 15 were for non-residential. This map gives you a nice layout of kind of how they went through the city. It looks like most of the CUPs were up I-35 in the central area, and then also a few in East Temple. And most of the residential plots were done out in West Temple. This just gives you a quick number snapshot of the types of plots. Residential, we did 971 on about 382 acres. We did 27 non-residential on about 592 acres. Next one kind of gives you a quick number snapshot of the total P&Z cases. You just want to look down at the bottom of that one. 88 were processed, 74 were approved, 3 were withdrawn, 4 were denied, and 5 are still pending. And after that, if there are any questions or any things you guys want to discuss, we can try to do that.
Council, any questions or discussion? Mr. Sears, I'd just like to thank you for being the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it is certainly probably our most active board, and you certainly put your time in, and thanks for all you do, and please extend thanks to everyone else on the commission as well.
Well, I appreciate that, but it has been a learning process, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve that commission very much. I really do. I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for the report. There is no action to be taken. Item 4, under annexation, a public hearing, receive municipal service plan and conduct a public hearing to receive comments on the possible annexation known as the Plains of Riverside Voluntary Annexation for a 49.979 tract of land located between South Pea Ridge Road to the west and Old Waco Road to the east, abutting the city limits boundary to the north, situated within the Nancy Chance Survey, abstract number 5, Bell County, Texas. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let me just go straight to our aerial photo just to identify where the voluntary annexation, the just under 50-acre tract that was described in the caption, where it's located. Here you can see South Pea Ridge to the west and Old Waco to the east. And this is at the top of the donut hole, as we call it. And here's a view from Old Waco Road of the site. You can see it's vacant. There is actually one residence in the northeast corner, which you can see the edge of some of the accessory buildings there. And so we have, as is required by state statute, developed a municipal service plan, and this is the first of 2 public hearings to receive comments from neighbors. Second one is tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. And here's a survey of the property. And so here you can see the existing homestead in the northeast corner. And once again, South Pea Ridge on the west, Old Waco on the east. Now, this request was accompanied by a zoning request, which will be reviewed by Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday, the 7th. And the request is for a zoning of SF2, single family 2, and a strip along Old Waco Road of O2 zoning. So the first reading would be at council for the zoning and the annexation on May 1st. Second reading 2 weeks later on the 15th. And this is just the calendar, which we've gone over the major details in terms of dates coming up, but this is fairly detailed, as is required by state statute. And of course, you all remember that you approved the resolution to start this process per the Local Government Code, Chapter 43, and that was on March 20th. And in terms of the municipal service plan, we developed it, sent it out to all the relevant departments, including fire and police, parks, public works, essentially just committing to provide standard city services and to get comments. This proposal does not include any extension of utilities at this time. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that it also doesn't include the adjacent roads, South Pea Ridge and Old Waco. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have or entertain any comments by the public.
Thanks, Mr. Chandler. Council, any questions? This is scheduled for a public hearing. Please step to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Since I forgot last time, CJ Grisham, 4365 Airport Trail. I just have a simple question. Is this a voluntary annexation?
Yes, sir.
So they requested, okay.
That's correct.
That's all?
Any other? All right. I'll declare the public hearing closed. No action is necessary. There will be a second public hearing tomorrow, Friday, April 7th at 8:30 a.m. here in the council chambers. Next item is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, the consent agenda, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member and will be considered separately. Council, this is item 5A through 5L. I think we're going to pull item J. Are there any other items that you wish to remove for separate consideration or discussion? And if not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda 5A through 5L minus 5J.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
And aye. Item 5J, consider adopting a resolution, 1, accepting a petition to institute voluntary annexation proceedings for Lakewood Ranch, a 136.576 acre tract of land located to the north of the Highlands and west of the Windmill Farm subdivision, abutting the city limits boundary to the north and west, situated within part of the John J. Simmons Survey, abstract number 737, in the George V. Lindsay Survey, abstract number 513, Bell County, Texas. And 2, directing the staff to develop a municipal services plan and calling public hearings to consider the petition. And Mr. Chandler, there was a change in that.
Yes, that is correct. The second public hearing is to be rescheduled from April 18th, which is Good Friday and a city holiday, to the same time on the following Monday, the 21st of April, 8:30 a.m. here in the council chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council, any discussion? I would entertain a motion making that change to item 5J as Mr. Chandler stated.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Item 6, first reading in a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from single-family 2 district to commercial district on 1.103 acre tract of land situated in the Baldwin-Robertson Survey, abstract 17, Bell County, Texas, located on the south side of Prairie View Road and North Pea Ridge Road intersection. The application has been withdrawn by the applicant, but we are scheduled for a public hearing. So at this time, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. There being no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed, and we have no action to take on that. Item 7, first reading in a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agricultural district to commercial district on 5.01 acres situated in the Maximo Merino Survey, abstract 14, Bell County, Texas, located on the north side of East Adams Avenue, addressed as 2312 East Adams Avenue. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Again, this application was before the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 3rd, and the applicant is Martha Priori. The comprehensive and future land use plan does identify the property as both auto urban commercial and suburban residential. And just to start with on the zoning, the property is identified here. There is to the south, both agricultural, commercial, and general retail, and surrounded on the north and all other sides with commercial agriculture zoning as well. This is a map of the future land use plan, and again, as indicated before, the property has 2 districts within the future designated by the future land use plan. The auto urban commercial district would support commercial zoning, and the suburban residential district is more for mid-sized single-family lots. So the request is not in full compliance with the land use plan. This map shows the relationship between the property and the FEMA floodplain and the 2 land use designations. Again, the property is almost split with suburban residential to the north, the auto urban commercial to the south. Since there are restrictions about development within the floodplain, this portion of the property may not lend itself well to residential development, and commercial zoning may be a more suitable choice to the north. In terms of the thoroughfare plan, East Adams is a major arterial and does require a 6-foot sidewalk. This would be noted on any kind of future plat that comes in. In terms of the trails master plan, a citywide spine trail is identified in East Adams, and the design and location would also be addressed with the plat. Both water and sewer are available to the property as shown by this figure. Just some photos of the property and surrounding property. I'll go through these briefly. Again, both to the north, undeveloped, and the FEMA floodplain as well. To the south, to the east and west. The commercial zoning does allow uses, residential and non-residential uses, with the residential detached single-family residences, industrial housing. With the non-residential, one that I would like to just bring out your attention to would be also the alcoholic beverage sales for off-premise consumption. This is beer and wine only. This is permitted by right within the zoning. The reason I bring this up is that there's a rehab center immediately to the east of the property. Prohibited uses and conditional uses, specifically as a conditional use, the beverage sales, off-premise consumption, or package store does require conditional use, and that would have to come before the City Council for review as a use permit. Development standards are shown for the commercial zoning. 12 property owners were noticed. Staff did not receive any in opposition or in support of the zone change. Just to kind of summarize, the future land use plan, the request partially complies. The compatibility with surrounding uses and zoning, it does. Utility plan and thoroughfare plan, all three of those are compliant. Staff believes that the portion of the property within the FEMA floodplain, as well as with potential access issues, the property does not lend itself well if it were to be rezoned and developed for residences. And the FLUP would need to be updated if the request is approved. So therefore, staff is recommending approval of the request for a rezone from general agricultural to commercial. And at its March 3rd meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval. And that does conclude my presentation, and I'm available should you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Counsel?
You did say that a package store would have to have a conditional use permit, but as far as a convenience store selling just beer would be able to actually build on this property, correct?
Be a permitted use, correct.
Is there any rules and regulations for the rehab center as far as how close they can be to a package store or a convenience store selling alcoholic beverages? Is there it seemed like there was something on that when the rehab center came out?
That's a good question. I'm not aware of any, but certainly that would be something that staff would look at if the inquiry came to us, and we would process it.
Do we know what's going to be built here?
No, the applicant has not provided any indication of the type of uses.
Counsel, any other questions? This time I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. There being no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Counsel, your pleasure on the first reading of this ordinance.
Would move for approval.
Second.
Second.
A motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Item 8, first reading in a public hearing. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agricultural district to two-family district on 17.95 acres and from an agricultural district to Office 2 district on 3.64 acres, being part of the Nancy Chance Survey, abstract number 5, Bell County, Texas, located on the west side of Old Waco Road and the east side of South Pea Ridge Road, east of Westwood Estates. Mr. Chandler.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. This case went to P&Z on March 3rd. Second reading, of course, is scheduled for the 17th. And just give you a little bit of background, starting with some photos of the site. Top right, you can see this is a view from South Pea Ridge, and then below that, Old Waco Road, which actually looks back to the existing water tower, which is right next to Pea Ridge as well. It's, of course, rezoning from Ag to 2F, which is primarily for duplexes, and O2, which is an office district. The surrounding properties are primarily agriculture and larger residential lots at this point. Some zoning adjacent to Old Waco Road has been approved for future offices in O2 district as well. And just to provide a little bit of background, a reminder of cases that you all have seen, but also P&Z on this piece of property. Back on September 19th, you all heard the case ZFY 13-30, which was a request for general retail zoning, which does allow duplexes. And the motion failed due to a lack of a second. And then a second request for 2F, which is the current residential request, and a strip of general retail was considered by P&Z on December 3rd, and the motion failed due to lack of a second there, and the applicant withdrew the case at that point. But this is a new request, and so looking at the site here, you can see to the west, South Pea Ridge, this is at the dog leg, so essentially this is at the 90-degree turn. You can see the water tower that I mentioned, and so there's just a small strip adjacent to South Pea Ridge, and so no access is proposed onto South Pea Ridge, and I just want to make that clear. And then you can see Old Waco here to the east, and the strip of O2 that's proposed. In terms of the surrounding properties to the north, you can see the undeveloped land and agriculture uses, and you can also see that this utility line actually does run through the middle of the property as well. And then to the east, once again, rural and residential, larger lots in character. To the south, the same. And to the west, also rural uses and residential character. And so looking at the allowed uses within the 2F district, in addition to duplexes, they do allow residential single family and triplexes. Non-residential uses that are allowed are places of worship, child care centers, community centers. Prohibited uses in 2F, manufactured homes, all industrial uses except for recycling collection locations, townhomes, patio homes, apartments, and retail and commercial uses. Relevant development regulations for 2F, I want to draw your attention to lot size. For duplexes, that minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet. For single family, it's 6,000 square feet. So there is a distinction between the two. And looking at the O2 request for permitted uses, allows residential, single family, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and then for the non-residential, office, restaurants, hotels, and some services. Prohibited uses are building material sales, mini storage warehouse, alcohol beverage sales for off-premise consumption, in this case as well, just as the previous case. And in terms of development regulations, it's a minimum front yard setback of 25 feet. However, if the height exceeds 35 feet, then it requires additional setback to step step back for the additional height. Here looking at the future land use plan, here on the western portion you can see the yellow is identified as suburban residential. Those are your mid-sized single-family residential lots as conceived by the comprehensive plan. And then to the right you can see the pink, which is identified as suburban commercial. And looking at the Thoroughfare Plan and its impact on this piece of property, Old Waco Road is identified as a proposed major arterial, and the sections to the about a mile to the north are proposed for widening at Old Waco Road, but this is on the Transportation Capital Improvement Program. However, this section is not on the TCIP. And then in terms of South Pea Ridge, that's a proposed collector, or actually an existing collector, I should say. And in terms of utilities, there's access to 14 and 18-inch water lines as well as an 8-inch sewer line. And notices, of course, were sent out to property owners within 200 feet. 0 were received in agreement, 4 in disagreement. And our code has a provision that triggers a supermajority if more than 20% of the land area represented by those property owners is in disagreement. And you can see by this map that the area shown in the shaded is by those in disagreement represents 24, almost 25% opposition. And so that would trigger a supermajority. So we're going to break down the staff recommendation into 2 parts for each zoning district. In accordance with the 2F request, staff recommends denial of that request from Ag to 2F due to non-compliance with the proposed future land use plan. The density is greater than what was envisioned for the suburban residential single-family uses. In terms of the O2 request, staff recommends approval of that due to compliance with the future land use plan, but also it's important to point out that public facilities are available to the subject property. And P&Z's recommendation on March 3rd was 9-0 with the following conditions or additions. First one being for the rezoning from Ag to PD 2F with the condition that only duplexes and single-family homes are allowed in the 2F area. So essentially adding a planned development district component to it, which would require a future submittal of a site plan. And the second part of that P&Z recommendation was the rezoning from Ag to PD 02 with the condition that only non-residential uses be allowed on that strip adjacent to Old Waco Road. And due to the responses representing the more than 20% of those in disagreement, as I mentioned, a supermajority vote is required, and in this case, that would be 3 affirmative votes. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council, any questions? And actually, Mr. Chandler, I had one. If we were to go with the planning and zoning recommendation, we would have to state that motion that we were going with the recommendation of the planning and zoning. I'm sorry, I should probably look at you, Mr. Graham. I'm sorry. All right. Sorry, both. Thank you, both of you. Counselor, with any other questions? This time I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Mayor, Council, Pat Patterson, 4212 South 5th. I got a request from the applicant about a year ago to if I would consider building some duplexes out on this tract of land. And I told them that, yes, I would consider that, but that we would have to go through the rezoning process since it wasn't properly zoned. As you probably know, I've built quite a number of duplexes in town. In fact, I've built one that's just over the hill from this on about 6 acres, and we put 32 duplexes on that little tract of land. That's been almost 100% occupied for 2 years. Last year, I built 33 duplexes on a piece of property on the northeast side of town that I purchased from Miss Mayburn. And we just completed that project, and it's 100% occupied. Our city is growing. Our city needs housing that's not single-family housing. We either have to build apartment buildings, or we have to build duplexes, or fourplexes, or sixplexes, or some other type of housing other than single-family houses. There's a need on the west side for working people to have a place to live, and it doesn't necessarily follow that they have to all live in single-family houses. This tract of land is ideal because it has all the utilities there and could easily be built on. And one of the 20%, of course, is Mr. John Keeler to my right, and he objects because he says he's going to put some $150,000 houses on that property. Well, I'm going to build $180,000 duplexes, so I believe I will more than exceed his houses. I would encourage you to support this rezoning as it's been presented by the Planning and Zoning. Any questions?
Councilman, questions for Mr. Patterson? No, sir. Thank you. Any further comments? There being no further comments, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first reading of this ordinance.
Motion to approve with the plan developments as recommended by the P&Z.
Here's a second. Here's a second. This motion fails for lack of a second. Item 9, resolutions. Consider adopting a resolution approving the preliminary plat of Legacy Ranch, a 103.07 acre, 183 lot, 12 block residential and non-residential subdivision with a requested exception to Unified Development Code, Section 8.2.1D.4.B, projection of streets regarding street openings every 1,000 feet, located at the northwest corner of FM 1741, South 31st Street, and West FM 93. Mr. Chandler.
All right, thank you, Mayor. As you all know, because this preliminary plat requires an exception, council is the final authority. And as was read into the record, this is a request for an exception, the UDC, related to projection of streets, essentially stub outs for adjacent neighborhoods for projection of streets in the future, spaced at every 1,000 feet. Now I'll show you in a second the proposed plat, and it'll show you the existence of the Georgetown Railroad, which is not active now, but that was the consideration for the exception, and the code actually calls out locations of natural barriers and railroads as reasons to consider an exception to this code. Water and sewer services will be provided through the rights-of-way and within easements. And here is the preliminary plat. To the east, this is South 31st Street. To the south is FM 93, And then what's circled here is the Georgetown Railroad. And so the spacing that would be required is essentially a stub out for future road expansion to the west and also to the north. And you can see how that railroad is somewhat problematic in the configuration of the lots. This was deemed administratively complete on February 25th by the Development Review Committee. P&Z reviewed the preliminary plat on March the 3rd. And as you may recall, this is a plat associated with the zoning case FY 1418 that you all approved on March 6th, and that was for a planned development for general retail, allowing multifamily as well. The single family is allowed within that district. A little bit of other background in terms of starting with park fees. They would be required in the sum of $39,000 and change for the 177 single-family lots. That's at $225 per lot by code. Multifamily portion also requires fees amounting to $225 per dwelling unit. However, a 50% credit may be given for on-site recreational amenities, and a swimming pool is proposed at this location. That'll all have to be addressed during the final plat. Tract A is for a proposed private park to be maintained by the HOA, which does not count towards parkland dedication. But here you can see where that's located. That's Tract A. Staff recommends approval of the plat and the exception, the projection of streets regarding street openings every 1,000 feet. And P&Z also recommended approval, and a unanimous vote of 8-0 was given on March 3rd. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Council, any questions?
When this came up for zoning, there was some question from some of the neighbors regarding drainage.
Yes, sir.
There's nothing addressed on the plat on drainage. Will that be coming back to us at another time for any kind of approval?
At the preliminary plat, no exceptions to the drainage requirements have been requested, and so those, as planned, the drainage would not come back. But if there are any changes, then certainly it could. And Christy Andrews, the engineer, could perhaps address any technical questions, or if there are any plans to change. I believe she's here as well. But so yes, that we've heard the neighbor to the south. He also has had some concerns about that as well. The reality is that drainage flow is not intended to change, and they have to show that, and so they have shown that it won't change as a result of the development. So. Yes, we would. Yes, and the city engineer Don Bond just reminded me too that at final that will be reviewed again. But if there are any exceptions to that, then it would come back to council. But at this point, it doesn't appear that any exceptions have been proposed.
And I don't think Ms. Andrews is in the audience, but but Mr. Bond has looked over the engineer's reports, and everything is satisfactory not only on the applicant's side but our side as well.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right. There's no further discussion. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis? Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Dunn?
Aye. Item 10, consider adopting a resolution authorizing the purchase of a 5-door passenger sedan from Caldwell County Chevrolet of Caldwell in the amount of $16,953. Ms. Matke. I'll give you a moment. I called you out too soon. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. As discussed in the council workshop, we opened vehicle bids on March 18th. One of the 8 bids had a local preference implications. That being the one bid for the 5-door passenger sedan. The low bid that we received was from Caldwell Country Chevrolet for $16,953. However, we also received a bid from Johnson Brothers for $17,313.54. That's a $360.54 difference from the low bid, or 2.1%. In accordance with our city's local preference policy, staff is recommending the low bid, but council has the option to award to Johnson Brothers if you find that their bid offers the best combination of price and economic opportunity to the city. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council. Any questions? Stephen? All right. There's no discussion. Is there a motion?
Motion for approval as presented.
And that is without the local
Oh, I'm
preference?
sorry, no, with the local preference to award it to Johnson Brothers Ford
The
in the amount of $17,313.54.
you have a
Under
motion.
the city's local preference option policy, based on Johnson Brothers' bid offering the best combination of price and additional economic development opportunities for the city.
That's good.
Second.
I lost
All right. That's good. We have a motion and a second. I will not repeat the motion. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. And item 11 under board appointments, consider adopting a resolution appointing one member to serve as the city's representative on the board of directors of the Tax Appraisal District of Bell County for a 2-year term beginning January 1st, 2014. And I'd like to suggest that we appoint Scott Morrow, a local business owner, to that position. And council, if you have no further discussion, could I consider a motion for the appointment of Scott Morrow to fill the term beginning January 1st, 2014 to the Board of Directors of the Tax Appraisal District of Bell County?
So approved. So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Cloud.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Dunn.
Aye. And I was going to point out the Boy Scouts that stayed for almost all of the meeting, but they left. And so if they get to watch this at home, I'm glad that they were here. And if there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.